In this video, we're going to take a look at the new curve brushes that they have in ZBrush that they've added. So let's take a look at the brushes. Tap B to bring up your brush menu. And then go ahead and hit C to bring up all the C-related brushes. And the first one we'll take a look at is this curve line tube. So let's go ahead and click on that. And you can see we've got symmetry turned on. You can turn that on off by hitting X. And this brush will allow you to just take a line and click and drag out. And you can see it's going to be a straight line. And it's going to build a piece of geometry, a tube, based off of the line that you've created. Now, if we want to edit this curve, we can go ahead and place our cursor over the top of it and then click and drag. So we can change the length of the tube. And you can see whenever I hover my cursor over the top of the curve itself, my cursor turns from a red color to this green color. This is going to indicate that we're going to be working with the curve, and you can see if I click and drag on this, I would be able to start editing the shape of the curve. Now, while your cursor is over the top of this, you can tap S to make your brush larger or smaller. So the larger your brush is, you're going to get a better kind of fall off for this curve for editing it. I'm just going to hit undo to get back to there. And if I tap S and make my brush size smaller, you can see the kind of an effect that I'll have on that brush at that point. So your brush size is important when you're actually editing the curve, and if you're trying to make the curvature larger or smaller for your edits. Now, this tube, how do we get the size of this tube to change? So you can see we've got our normal cursor. If we tap S for that, we can make this larger or smaller. So let's take a look at dragging it down pretty small. Now all I have to do is click on this curve again, and it's going to regenerate the geometry for us based off of the size of this indicator here for our normal brush. If I make it larger and I click and drag, it's going to make the geometry a lot larger. So you'll have to play around with the right size for your normal brush to get the right size for the tube, and then hovering your cursor over the curve itself, you'll have to play around with what is the size that you're looking for in order to generate the edits for your curve. One thing to note about these curves and editing them, you can see we've got a point here at the top and a point here at the bottom. If we click and drag those points, we can change the overall vector of the curve itself. So you're going to get options for playing around with the start and end point of a curve. And then you're also going to get the option of clicking and dragging inside the curve itself and changing some of the options there for that. So I'm going to put this back at maybe an angle like so, and maybe drag this out a bit. Okay. Let's take a look at some of the options that we have for the generation of the curve. Some of the segments for this. So you can see right now as I hover my cursor over the top of this curve, there's many different little points on here that are going to allow me to edit the shape of the curve. We can have some control of that at creation time. So if we go to stroke, open this up, and we're going to click this little icon here to dock this over to the right. You can see that we're in this curve mode, and that's what's causing this curve line tube to be generated using this curve mode. We have curve steps. If we click and draw that out currently, you can see with a setting of 2, you can see these segments that it's drawing with, and it's going to kind of drag this out throughout the curve. And then when I let go, you can see how many segments that we actually have for this. So I'm going to hit undo and take this down to an even smaller number, which is going to give us more segments. If I start dragging this number up, you can see how that's going to quickly kind of change the amount of segments that we have at that point. So now when I edit, I'm going to have fewer points to work with on this curve. It's just something to keep in mind for whenever you're working with these things. So I'm going to put that back down to around 2. And then when I drag out with this one, you can see I should start having more to work with. I'll drop that down to 1. And that should give me fairly nice results to get a nice kind of curve moving on here. So that is the Curve Line 2 brush. You can work with that to drag out a straight curve and generate geometry from that. And you can actually even go through and edit the curve after the fact to start tweaking the look of that curve. So tap B for brushes and then C for curve. And let's take a look at the curve quad fill. So if we click this, and if we drag out a shape, you can see it's going to draw the shape out, and it's actually going to give us an extrude for the shape as well. And after the fact, we can click and drag the endpoints of this to give us some different shapes for that curve. And we can click the points, the individual points with the curve as well to affect that. And we do have an option for how thick this is going to be. The same kind of options we looked at before. If we have our cursor over here, over the curve itself, it turns this greenish color, and we can actually start tweaking some of the shape for it. And if we have our normal cursor and we drag that down smaller, and we click on one of these endpoints, or one of the points along the curve, is going to regenerate the shape for us based off that thickness. So you can see it's pretty thin right now. If I drag my cursor larger and then just click on it, it's going to regenerate that, and it's going to be nice and thick for us. So I'm going to see real quickly what kind of shape I might be able to draw out that would benefit us on this model. Go ahead and just draw out some kind of shape for maybe some kind of wings. Okay. And see if I can't rotate these back some. I'll make my brush smaller, have these be nice and thin. So after you create the curve here, say I want to edit this a little bit. And I'm not really sure why the triangles are showing up. I know there's a new release that's going to be coming out for ZBrush. That's going to be ZBrush 4R2B, and maybe that's some of the things they're going to deal with. But it looks like just taking some of these points and then dragging this out to where it generates a new shape for me. Can get rid of some of those errors. So when I'm done with this, we can actually use our transform tools and work with this shape a little bit further. So if I want to refine this and maybe move it around a little bit more and rotate it, I can do that with the transform tools. So I'm going to put it on the move and just move it down just slightly. Just kind of wanting to push this back this way a little bit and then move it up. Again, these transpose tools or these move brushes, scale and rotate, are dependent on what your vantage point is for moving these things around. So I can click and drag here, and I'm going to kind of rotate it around in this direction here. Kind of like so. And it will take you a little while just to kind of figure out how to really leverage these tools up here to get the translation and rotation that you're looking for. Okay, so I'm going to put that on draw and then remesh everything. So I've added these tubes in along with these new shapes that we have here for these kind of wing things. All right, let's take a look at the curve surface brush. So if we tap B and then C for curve and then go to curve surface, we can draw one line out off the surface, and then we can draw another line out, and you can see it's going to do a loft between the two surfaces here. So let's try this again. We'll just draw this curve here and then this curve, and we've actually drawn out a new shape for this that we can manipulate after the fact. Pretty interesting tool and a way to generate surfaces. So again, for this, we can just go ahead and click and drag out. And we can actually just keep adding additional lines and keep generating surfaces off of this. So if I want to end that curve, then I can go ahead and hold down Control and drag a marquee in the open viewport here. And then remesh. And now at that point, after I've remeshed, then I can start with a new curve at that point. It's a very interesting way to generate geometry. So let's look at another curve type. Let's hit B and then go to C and go to curve, try fill. And you can see with this one, this is going to allow us to just quickly draw a shape. And then it's going to have this kind of line that comes off of it that allows it to just finish a nice straight line at the end for the surface. So this is just another way of generating some surfaces off of these curves that we're drawing out. So you can really just quickly draw some shapes and then extrude these things out. And again, you can just tap S on your normal brush and then tap a piece of the model or the curve that you've drawn out, and it's actually going to remesh that for you and generate a new mesh at that point. So let's take a look at another curve type. So hit B and then hit C, and we have just curve tube. And that's going to generate just like what the name says. You're going to be able to draw out a nice curve shape and then just go ahead and manipulate the curve, and it's going to generate a tube for you. So maybe I can use this to generate something from the back of the head, maybe some kind of wiring. And didn't mean to grab that one there. So we've got this. I'm going to drag this out a little bit, and I want those tubes to be larger. So I'll take my brush size larger and drag this around. And you can see this curve step is a little bit low. If I want to redraw that out and have less segments to worry about, I could do that. So I'll go ahead and put it on the move brush. Just see about dragging that up real quick, just like that. Maybe seeing if I could scale this up just a little bit. I'm going to go through the remesh action. Take a look at here. I'm going to hide everything real quick, holding Control Shift and just clicking on the these bars here. It's got a poly group on it. So if I hold down Control and just click in the viewport, it's going to mask that section. Hold down Control and Shift, click in the viewport to bring everything back. And I'm going to inverse that mask, hitting Control I. So now I've got everything masked out except for this, and I can put on my the move brush. So tap B, M, and then V. Now we can just kind of finesse this just a little bit. I want to push this up into the body just a little bit so it intersects with the surface. Maybe smooth just a little bit. Okay, we now have that. And I'm actually not too thrilled about these shapes that I've generated up here. So I'm going to isolate them by holding down Control and Shift, clicking on them. And if I hold down Control Shift and drag in the open viewport, it's going to give me the opposite of what I had visible. So now at that point I can delete hidden. So if we go to, we're in stroke here, let's go to the tool section and go to geometry. So here we are, tool, scroll down, geometry, and we can say delete hidden, which is down here a little bit further. So say delete hidden, and now that shape is going to be gone. Okay, we're going to look at one more brush type for the curves. So if we tap B and hit C for curves, we can go and put it on this curve tube snap. And you can see with this brush, it's going to allow us to click and drag on the surface. So it's actually going to draw geometry on the surface of the model, which can be very cool. One thing that we can do with these curves, if we go back to our stroke, we can hit snapshot for our current curve that we have, and we can click and drag this new copy around. So here I can hit snapshot again and drag a new copy of this. Snapshot again and drag a new copy. So that might be useful for you to generate some cool shapes. So depending on what you're going to try to build with your model, these different brushes that you have for the curve tubes and curve lines are really going to help aid you in generating new and exciting surfaces really quickly, so you can just explore some of these ideas. There's one more option that I want to show is for the curves, and this has to do with the creation of the geometry that flows out from the curve. We do have some additional control for that, so let's take a look at that real quick. Let's tap B for brushes, and then C for the curves, and let's go ahead and put it on curve line tube, and we'll draw a new line out, and that's going to generate this piece of geometry. We've already taken a look at this this brush type, but what we haven't taken a look at is if we go into stroke, so that would be up here, and we can dock that off to the right, open that up. You can see that there is a curve fall off, and this is just going to generate a surface that's nice and linear for us. What we can do is add points to this, and then click and drag, and that will regenerate our surface for us if you turn on the size. So now you can see that this is going to represent some sort of fall off. So if we come here, just click and drag a new point, and if I click and drag here, you can see how this shape is going to be represented by these curves here. So if I pull this down, have this up high, and then just click here to regenerate, you can see the kind of shapes that we're getting here. This can be useful if you want to do some kind of shapes that you're pulling out. Like say this would work well for a maybe a muscle fiber where it attaches, and it's small where it attaches and it's larger in the center. If you think about a muscle fiber that stretches along the bicep of an arm, it's going to have that bulge here. And if I want to make this shape larger, just click this here, and you can see I can start to taper this down a little bit more, and just click and drag. Now I did notice that when you click and drag, see how I pushed in the middle here? It's going to repeat that shape for us. So it's something to be aware of. So if I click at the endpoints, it's going to push this along the entire portion of the curve here. So I can click and drag that in here, like so. And maybe I can drag this over here. It appears that when I have symmetry turned on with a brush, I can't actually edit the curve on this side. I have to edit the curve that was actually generated at generation time. So that's something else to be kind of aware of. So I'm going to click and drag this here, and I want this to be nice and large here. So clicking on the endpoints does have an effect on what's the direction of the curve. So you're just going to have to kind of work with that a little bit and kind of figure that out. If I want this to be nice and linear for the line, I can click and drag this circle thing that's going to kind of tighten up that curve that we have there. And to get rid of points, I can click and drag them out. So you're just going to have to kind of experiment with what's going to work correctly for what you're looking for here. So these are some nice kind of shapes that I wanted to generate. So I want to pull that back up that way a little bit more, but I still want this direction for this, and the size is a little bit large. So I'm going to drag my brush down just a little bit until I get something that I'm happy with. And I kind of like these shapes here. So I'm going to hold down Control and drag a more key in the open viewport and do that again just to get that to remesh everything. Now I can start working on smoothing this and actually changing the geometry. All right, so here we are at that stage for these steps.